Albert Einstein once said that a ship is always safe at the shore, but that is not what it is built for. Most people go through their lives never taking a risk. This, however, does not apply to innovators. Inventing new things is fun and exciting. Discovering you've created something unique with the potential to bring something good or bad to humanity is the life goal of many. But what happens when the invention goes wrong and actually ends up killing the inventor? Let's look at some of the inventors who had a case of bad luck and an invention that went wrong. Terribly wrong. Join us as we have a look at some innovations that managed to kill their inventors. Meet Austrian-born French tailor Franz Reichelt. On February 4th of 1912, good old Franz had a good old idea, but then it ended up being a terrible idea. You see, Franz created a wingsuit, which he believed would make you fly. You can see where this is going, right? In 1912, so it would be on that February day that Franz climbed the Eiffel Tower in order to test out his new wingsuit. You should know that his friends were totally against the idea, but you can't really change the mind of an ambitious inventor who wants to pretend he's a flying squirrel. The suit apparently held just a little more volume than an ordinary item of clothing and resembled a cloak with a vast hood of silk. However, Franz thought it was an ideal parachute, and that all he had to do to release it was to extend his arms. So, at 8:22 in the morning, Franz made his ascent of the Eiffel Tower, while 30 journalists, 2 cinematographers, and a large crowd stood by to watch him take that leap. Needless to say, we think you know what happened to him next. According to a few journalists on site, his body was a shapeless mass when the police picked it up. And of course, the autopsy determined that he accidentally died of a heart attack that happened during his fall. Be careful there, Icarus. Now, it should be kept in mind that Franz wasn't the only person who was fascinated by the thought of flying. Maybe you've heard of Otto Lilienthal. Perhaps the name Glider King might ring a bell. Well, he was the pioneer of human aviation and the first person to make a repeated successful gliding flight. So, unlike Franz, his innovations actually worked. Well, kind of, that is. You see, gliding can be dangerous, and Otto was a true example of that. His invention was popular, especially because according to the newspapers, there was really nothing scientific about it. However, Otto didn't really care and continued to glide his way towards popularity. That was until the 9th of August in 1896, when he tumbled 17 meters and broke his spine. He died the very next day, with his final words being, "Small sacrifices must be made." Agreed, Otto. Very much agreed. And the fascination behind flying just doesn't really seem to end when it comes to innovators. Everyone wants to be the first one to invent something so unique that it would make us see the world from a different perspective. And so did Harry Smolinski, who quit his job in order to start a company called Advanced Vehicle Engineers. You see, good old Henry wanted to create a commercially viable flying car, but he didn't really seem to realize that he was a little bit ahead of his time. After all, it was only 1973, and Back to the Future wouldn't occur for another 12 years. Seriously though, he did manage to build 2 prototype vehicles, and his prototypes consisted of a rear end of an airplane being attached to a Ford Pinto. Maybe he'd been better off with the DeLorean. Needless to say, the whole thing did not go exactly as he had planned. On September 11th of 1973, Smolinski died during the test flight as the wing detached from the vehicle. Tough luck, Henry. We're still waiting for Back to the Future to become real. Planting our feet on solid ground, we turn away from the air for a while and turn our eyes towards Thomas Midgley Jr. Now, here's a little lowdown on what you should know about Thomas. He's an American engineer and a chemist who developed additives for gasoline and CFCs, with 100 patents over his lifetime. So I guess you could say he did a pretty good job, right? Well, he was nowhere near done with his inventions, and in his late life, he unfortunately contracted polio, which ended up disabling his abilities to move. But Thomas didn't give up. He came up with a string system that would help others lift him out of the bed. While it wasn't exactly the best solution, it certainly did help him in some aspects of his life. And his invention would go on to work for about 4 years. That was until he unfortunately tangled himself in the ropes and then strangled to death. This next one on our list might not be an invention, but it was more like an idea full of adrenaline rush that simply went a little bit wrong. But we do have to give kudos to the daredevil behind it. Karel Susak was a Czechoslovakian stuntman who did something not a lot of people have even dared to do, and there's a reason behind it. He would go over Niagara Falls in a custom-built shock-absorbent barrel, which was 9 feet long and measured 5 feet in diameter. And no, that's not how his story ends. Somehow, he magically survived that stunt and wanted to take it one step further. So, just 1 year later, he convinced a sponsor company to drop the barrel from the top of the Houston Astrodome into a tank of water. Now, get this, it was a 180-foot drop. And it wasn't even Niagara Falls, it was a tank of water. Now, most daredevils called the stunt the most dangerous thing that they had ever seen, and they even tried talking him out of it. I mean, it seems like a pretty sure sign that the entire thing should be canceled, right? It seems that no cares were given that day by Karel, and the barrel did manage to drop. The result? When it was released, it started to spin, and it hit the rim of the tank, crushing his abdomen and fracturing his skull in the process. Here's a little lesson for you kids. Don't climb inside of a barrel and drop yourself from anything, ever. Now let me ask you this. How do you feel about rocket-powered cars? Sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? Well, the person behind the very first rocket-powered car experiment was Max Valier. Valier was Austrian-born, known as a pioneer in rocketry. He experimented with liquid-fueled rockets for rocket-powered cars and even made a successful test drive for a rocket car. Unfortunately, though, for Max, not all of his tests were successful, and he would later be killed by an alcohol-fueled rocket. Another automotive pioneer that you should know about is Sylvester H Roper, who was born in 1823 in Boston, Massachusetts. He was an inventor and a pioneering builder of early automobiles and motorcycles. Now, if you're questioning his credibility, however, you should only go as far as to check the Motorcycle Hall of Fame. That's where you'll find his Roper steam velocipede. Roper even built the first steamed carriage in 1863 and created a patent for a shotgun mechanism, which leaves you thinking that he's probably a pretty intelligent guy. But unfortunately, Roper died of a heart attack during a public speed trial in 1896. Now, there's no evidence as to which occurred first, the crash or the heart attack. So the Boston Daily Globe obituary reported that Roper pretty much died in the saddle. John Godfrey Parry-Thomas was a huge fan of Roper's invention. This Welsh motor racing driver and engineer had a need for speed and adrenaline. And he wasn't just all about driving race cars, he also wanted to create them. His competitiveness wanted to be the best, and he was determined to break the land speed record. So he went on to develop a car that would allow him to do just that. Then, on the 27th of April, 1926, he raised the land speed record to 170 miles per hour. And all was well, and he seemed pretty pleased with himself. For about a year, until he tried to break it again. But there was a problem. His race car had many untested and unsafe modifications, including exposed chains which connected the wheels to the engines. During his race, to break his own record, one of the chains managed to decapitate him by snapping and flying into his neck, and he died on the spot. But of course, males are not the only ones who end up screwing around and getting killed by their own brains. There's also female inventors out there who have met tragic endings. Marie Curie's one of them, and if you didn't know who she was before, you'll definitely find out within the next minute. Curie was Polish and French, and she was also a popular chemist who specialized in discovering new elements, including radium and polonium. After moving to Paris, she would conduct most of her scientific work, including the theory of radioactivity. Curie even won the Nobel Prize in 1903, along with her husband Pierre, and she isolated polonium in 1898 and named it after her birth country, Poland. She sounds pretty awesome, doesn't she? Well, I hate to break it to you, but her life ended tragically. She ended up dying at the age of 66 due to anemia from all of the radiation work that she was doing by carrying test tubes of radium in her pockets during her research and while working in World War I mobile X-ray units. But still, all hats off to you, Marie Curie. And have you ever wondered who was behind the whole printing revolution? William Bullock is the man to thank. In 1863, the American inventor brought rotary printing presses to life and helped revolutionize the printing industry and helped with its speed and efficiency as well. Bullock, however, would unfortunately have a fatal printing accident after his foot got crushed under one of the machines when he tried to repair it. So the next time that piece of junk that your grandma got you for Christmas is running slow or maybe eating the paper and causing a paper jam, just think, they could kill you if they really wanted to. And finally, we have the biggest accident of them all, and it happened on a ship. And no, it wasn't the Titanic, and no icebergs were involved. Cowper Phipps Coles was a Royal Navy captain and the man behind a revolving gun turret for ships. The idea behind it was to create the greatest possible all-around arc of fire in order to minimize the target. The only problem was, he didn't really consider why warships were actually built the way they were, and what effects his invention might have on the rest of the ship while out on the open sea. He would try out his designs on a warship called the HMS Captain, which was modified to fit Cole's needs. One of these needs was to create a hurricane deck, an upper deck on the ship which raised the center of gravity, something that Cole did not at all consider during his designs and modifications. And as you can imagine, it did not end well. The ship had too many construction errors to survive the cruise, and it sank in 1870. Almost 500 lives, including the life of its captain, Cowper Phipps Coles, were lost, all because of an experiment. So I guess you could say it rings true. Risk-taking comes with a price, but don't forget that knowledge is power. And these inventors certainly prove that right balance of both can either create something extremely useful for humanity or turn the whole thing into a series of unfortunate events. So, if you dare, grab a pen and a paper and do some research, then get to work. And then tell us what you would invent in the comments below. Thanks for watching.